1978. A concert 3 minutes from starting. Bob Dylan tuning his guitar backstage. Then someone in the crowd began playing a melody on a harmonica, and Dylan stopped. Because that melody belonged to someone he'd taught 15 years ago. The sound came through the curtain. Thin. Distant. But unmistakable. Dylan's hand froze on the fretboard. His thumb resting on the low E string, halfway through the turn that would bring it into tune. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just listened. Around him, the pre-show chaos continued. Roadies adjusting cables. Band members warming up. The stage manager checking his watch, counting down minutes. Nobody noticed that Bob Dylan had stopped tuning his guitar. Nobody except Dylan knew what that sound meant. The harmonica played 4 notes. Then stopped. Then 4 more. A melody from 1963. A melody Dylan had taught to someone in a coffee house in Greenwich Village, back when he was nobody, back when teaching someone a harmonica line meant sitting knee-to-knee on a wooden floor with cigarette smoke thick in the air and believing that music could actually change something. Dylan stood up slowly. The guitar still in his hands, unfinished, 1 string sharp and 1 flat. He walked toward the stage entrance, toward the sound. The stage manager stepped in front of him. "Bob, 2 minutes. You ready?" Dylan didn't answer. He was looking past the curtain, past the lights, into the crowd of 3,000 people waiting in the Civic Auditorium in Portland, Oregon. Searching for the source of that sound. Dylan didn't explain himself. He never did. To understand what Dylan heard in those 4 notes, you have to go back 15 years. To 1963. To a basement coffee house called the Gaslight on McDougal Street in New York City. Dylan was 22 years old. He'd released his first album. Nobody had bought it. 2,000 copies pressed. 1,000 returned. He was playing coffee houses for $5 and free coffee, sleeping on friends' couches, writing songs that mattered to almost nobody yet. One night after a set, a kid approached him. Maybe 17, 18 years old. Thin. Wore clothes that didn't fit right, the kind you get from church donation bins. He was carrying a harmonica. "Mr. Dylan?" The kid's voice was quiet, apologetic for existing. "I heard you play Man of Constant Sorrow tonight. The harmonica part. Could you show me how you did that?" Dylan looked at him. Really looked. Not the way you look at a fan asking for an autograph. The way you look at someone when you recognize something familiar in their face. Hunger, maybe. Or desperation disguised as hope. "You know how to play that thing?" Dylan asked, nodding at the harmonica. "A little. Self-taught." "I don't read music or anything." "Neither do I." Dylan gestured to an empty table in the corner. "Sit down." They sat. Dylan pulled out his own harmonica. For the next hour, while the coffee house emptied and the owner swept around them, Dylan taught this kid the melody line too. Man of Constant Sorrow. Not the notes. Dylan didn't know the notes. He taught him the feeling. Where to breathe. When to let the silence do the work. "What's your name?" Dylan asked when they were done. "Thomas." "Thomas Webb. You got somewhere to sleep tonight, Thomas?" The kid hesitated. "I'll find something." "That means no." Dylan stood up. "Come on." Dylan took him back to the apartment he was crashing at. Let him sleep on the floor. In the morning, over instant coffee, Thomas told him his story in fragments. Ran away from home in Ohio. Father drank. Mother gone. Thought maybe New York would be different. It wasn't. Been living in doorways and subway stations for 3 months. The harmonica was the only thing he owned that mattered. "You gonna go back home?" Dylan asked. "Can't. Won't." Dylan understood that. He'd left Minnesota and never looked back either. Different reasons, same result. You don't run towards something. You run away and hope you land somewhere that doesn't hurt as much. "Stay here a few days," Dylan said. "I got a gig Thursday at the bitter end. You can carry my guitar case. They'll give you $5. Thomas stayed 3 days. Then a week. Then a month. He slept on floors and carried equipment, and sat in the back of coffee houses while Dylan played, and every night Dylan would teach him something new. A harmonica technique. A chord progression. A way of thinking about melody that didn't require knowing theory. Thomas wasn't going to be famous. Dylan knew that. The kid was good enough to play in subway stations and maybe back up in a folk band if he got lucky. But there was something in him that understood music the way Dylan did. As survival, not ambition. You gotta write your own stuff, Dylan told him one night. Don't just play other people's songs. I don't have anything to say. Everyone's got something to say. You just ain't figured out how to say it yet. Thomas tried. He wrote bad poems and worse lyrics. Dylan would listen without judgment, and then show him where the music lived in the words. Where the rhythm wanted to go. Where the emotion was hiding under the bad metaphors. One afternoon in February 1964, Thomas came back to the apartment with a melody. Just 4 notes on the harmonica. Simple. Almost too simple. But there was something in it. A loneliness that felt earned. That's good, Dylan said. What is it? I don't know. Just came to me. It's yours. Keep it. 2 days later, Thomas was gone. No note. No explanation. His harmonica left on the floor. Dylan asked around the village. Nobody had seen him. He checked hospitals, shelters, even called the precinct. Nothing. Thomas Webb had vanished the same way he'd appeared, without warning, without trace. Dylan kept the harmonica for a while. Carried it in his guitar case. He told himself Thomas would come back for it. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years, and eventually Dylan stopped thinking about the kid from Ohio who learned, "Man of constant sorrow," in a coffee house and disappeared into the same city that had swallowed him in the first place. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. By 1978, Dylan was 47 years old. He'd been famous for more than a decade. He'd revolutionized folk music, gone electric and been booed for it, written songs that defined generations he never asked to define. He'd been called a prophet and a sellout. He'd gotten married, had children, gotten divorced. He'd nearly died in a motorcycle accident. He'd converted to Christianity. He'd released albums that changed everything and albums nobody listened to. He was tired. Not physically. Spiritually. The weight of being Bob Dylan. Of carrying the expectations of millions of people who needed him to mean something, had worn grooves into his soul that no amount of touring or silence could smooth out. He didn't think about Thomas Webb anymore. Not consciously. The kid had become one of dozens, maybe hundreds, of people Dylan had met in those early years who'd faded into memory and mythology. Just another face in the blur of 1963. Until Portland. Until 3 minutes before a show. Until 4 notes on a harmonica came through the curtain. Away from the spotlight, Dylan made a choice no one expected. "Hold the start," Dylan said to the stage manager. "What?" "Hold it. 5 minutes. Bob, we got 3,000 people out there." 5 minutes. Dylan walked onto the stage without his band. Without introduction. Without the lights coming up properly. The crowd noise swelled and then dropped to confused silence when they realized it was just him, standing there in the half-dark with his guitar out of tune. He raised one hand. The universal gesture for wait. "Whoever's playing the harmonica," Dylan said, his voice barely amplified, the sound system still being adjusted. "Play those 4 notes again." Silence. 3,000 people holding their breath. Then, from somewhere in the middle section, those 4 notes. Thin. Shaky. But unmistakable. Dylan walked to the edge of the stage. "Keep playing." The harmonica player played. The same 4 notes, then 8 more. The melody Thomas had created in 1964 and then carried with him into whatever darkness he'd disappeared into. Dylan stood at the stage edge, his guitar hanging from the strap, and listened. When the harmonica stopped, he spoke. "I know that melody. I knew someone who wrote it. 15 years ago. His name was Thomas Webb. If that's you playing, I need you to come down here." The crowd murmured, confused. Nobody moved. "If it's not you," Dylan continued, "then I need to know where you learned it." A commotion in the middle section. People standing, turning, looking. Someone moving through the row. A figure making its way toward the aisle. The house lights came up slightly. Dylan could see him now. A man in his 30s. Thinner than he should be. Worn jacket. Graying hair that made him look older than his years. But the same face. Older, weathered, but the same. Thomas Webb walked down the aisle toward the stage. He stopped 10 feet away, looking up at Dylan. His hand holding the harmonica. His eyes wet. "I'm sorry I left," Thomas said. "I didn't know how to explain." Dylan crouched down at the stage edge. "Eye level now. You don't gotta explain anything to me. But I need to ask you something." "Okay. Have you been playing?" "These past 15 years? Thomas shook his head. "Sold the harmonica you gave me. Needed the money. Didn't play for 10 years. Then I got clean, got a job, bought this one last year. Been learning again. From scratch." "You clean now?" 3 years. Dylan nodded slowly. He stood up, took off his guitar, and set it down on the stage. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a harmonica. Not the one Thomas had left behind, that one was long gone. But a newer one. Well used. "Come up here," Dylan said. Thomas looked at the stage manager, who was frantically gesturing at someone. Security stepped aside. Thomas climbed the stairs to the stage. 3,000 people watching in absolute silence. Dylan handed him the harmonica. "You remember what I taught you? Man of constant sorrow?" "I think so. Let's find out." What followed stayed with everyone who witnessed it, long after the sound faded. Dylan picked up his guitar. Still out of tune. He didn't care. He started playing the opening chords to Man of Constant Sorrow, the song he taught Thomas in a coffee house basement in 1963, the song that had started everything. Thomas raised the harmonica to his lips. Hesitated. Then played. Shaky at first. Uncertain. But then muscle memory took over. The melody line Dylan had taught him 15 years ago came back. Not perfect. But real. They played together on that stage for 4 minutes. No backing band. No arrangement. Just 2 men and an old folk song and 15 years of silence between the notes. When the song ended, Dylan set down his guitar. He looked at Thomas. "You got somewhere to stay tonight?" Thomas smiled weakly. "Yeah. I got a place now." "Good." Dylan nodded. Then he turned to the crowd. "This is Thomas Webb. He's the reason I learned that sometimes teaching someone something matters more than what you do with it yourself." The crowd stood. 3,000 people applauding a man most of them had never heard of. Thomas stood there, overwhelmed, the harmonica still in his hand. Dylan started his set. Thomas sat on a chair at the side of the stage and listened. After the show, they talked for an hour in the dressing room. Dylan gave him his phone number. Told him to call if he needed anything. Share and subscribe, some stories deserve to be remembered. Thomas never became famous. He worked in a Portland music store, taught harmonica to kids on weekends, stayed clean. He and Dylan stayed in touch. Not often. But enough. In 2016, when Dylan won the Nobel Prize, Thomas was asked by a local reporter if he knew Bob Dylan. He said yes. When asked what Dylan was like, Thomas said, "He showed up when I needed someone to show up. That's all that matters." Dylan kept that philosophy. The world knew him as an icon. But some people knew him as the man who stopped tuning his guitar to listen.